On today's episode, why I think that letting go is the bad idea and what I suggest we can do instead.
This is how legends are made.
Hi there everyone, hope you're doing great wherever you are. I was just going to put a little video together. Just about my day, see how things are going, give you an update. But then a subject came to me, which I thought actually that is relevant and it has cropped up in a few conversations recently and I wanted to share it with you. But the first thing I wanted to just make clear, or at least I used to make clear for myself, which is very helpful. I'm not too sure that I like the words letting go first off, and I'll get to that in a minute. But the thing I wanted to make a difference over, for me, in my principle of things, letting go isn't about giving up hope. Hope, in my experience, can remain. You can be hopeful. Where the challenges come and the difficulties arise is when we create hope and look at it as expectation. That at some point we expect it to happen and therefore we're constantly disappointed when it doesn't. I'm describing hope as a fanciful wish of something happening. In that sense, it's about, there is no expectation, but there is an element that recognizes that were it to go a certain way, that would be a nice outcome. Because from the conversations I've been having more and more, and it's funny how these kind of seem to happen at the same time, when we have expectations linked into this letting go and this hope factor, it intensifies the feelings. It makes them harder to get perspective on them. But I do recognize that feeling of desiring something. So what I do, and what I suggested is you can hang on to the hope, but remove the expectation. And the best part of doing that is to recognize that hope can remain, but you have to see that you have no control on the outcome. You can hope all you want, you can wish all you want, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day you have no control of the outcome. And in that sense we can begin to, rather than let things go, we can leave them in the past. And I make the difference in the language. To leave something in the past doesn't diminish it, doesn't throw it away, it doesn't make it disposable. It recognizes that it existed in the past and places that there. Letting go somehow can feel like cutting off, like you just severed it away. And that's quite harsh sometimes. It can be more useful to say, I'm going to leave this in the past. So we have changing hope a little bit by defining it, saying that we have a wishful idea that if something did change, that would be a pleasant outcome, but we also recognize we have no control on it happening. And I think these things can live together. I think you can have both at the same time. I think there can be peace inside yourself by having these coexist, these two ideas. It all depends on how you're defining hope. But if you try and maneuver it to respect that it's kind of a desire for a positive outcome at some undetermined point in the future, with the full acknowledgement that you have no control over it, then we can be okay and it can sit and it can rest. And in that way, it can remain left in the past. And why do I mention all this? Because what can happen is the letting go action can feel painful. It can feel very difficult. And we can struggle, and that only perpetuates the whole problem. And what I'm looking to do is to remove the amount of friction and resistance as possible, because the more we kind of resist against something, the more it's going to stay, more it's going to persist. If we can end that war, end that fight, it's far more useful for us. So the best technique, with all that said, about leaving it in the past, about hope and no expectations and zero control of the outcome, what are the best steps to allow this process to go through, recognize the emotions, but not allow them to dwell? And so what I've suggested to a number of people has been the technique that I've used. The technique is simply to, when you're feeling something regarding the situation that you wish had a different outcome, or this person you were with that had a different outcome, whatever emotions you're feeling, acknowledge them. Become aware of them, obviously, first, and acknowledge that they are there. It's at this point we often then start saying, well, I mustn't feel that, or it can't be that way. And you create a lot of anxiety and stress as you kind of fight back against the feelings that are coming in. These could be even hopeful feelings or angry feelings, but all these emotions that are rolling around regarding the situation or this person, when we start to actually fight it, it intensifies and makes it harder to leave it in the past. When we acknowledge the emotions, acknowledge the feelings that are there, say, I'm feeling this right now, I recognize myself as feeling happy about a situation and remembering it, or angry that it didn't work out. When we can recognize that, we say, okay, I recognize that emotion, I'm feeling that right now, and we aim to acknowledge it without resisting it, and then we acknowledge that it can also leave when it's ready to. So at no point do we create any friction, any tension over it. We recognize the emotion coming in, we recognize what it is, and then allow it to take its time, but then allow it the space to leave, like a flowing through and out the other side. I think this is important for a number of reasons. One, it's important we should be able to recognize the emotion rather than fighting it like I mustn't feel this way. We'll feel a number of things as we look back on a situation which we think would have hoped to have a different outcome. So all the range of emotions you'll feel, which may not relate to the situation, but as a historical ones, personal ones that come back, becoming aware of them, acknowledging them is really healthy rather than pushing back or shutting them down. And then allowing the space to exist in you for whatever time they need to, but with a partition where you're acknowledging they exist, but you're not being deeply affected by them. You'll sense them, but the partition of acknowledgement will help you to say, okay, I know this resides in me. And the final element to allow it to go really allows that time to process through. To acknowledge how you feel is a deep sense of respect for yourself and your feelings and for the situation or the person that existed. And then we can allow it to leave it in the past. Now, you may feel a number of feelings throughout this whole process. As I say, it's amazing. Also, you're going to feel anger and upset and frustration and pain, and that's kind of the way it goes. And we can use this technique to allow it to kind of flow through us and then out. But it's also important, and I think this is the real winner as well, to do the exact same process with the positive feelings about the previous situation or the previous person. Allow those feelings to come in rather than again fighting them. Even though they're feeling good, allow them the space to feel good. But because the situation doesn't exist anymore, allow them to leave as well and put them in the past. It's important to do all emotions regarding this situation or this person, to allow it to come through you, allow its presence to be there, and then let it flow out. It's when we dwell, it's when we ponder, it's when we churn, that resistance increases our anxiety, increases the pain we're feeling, and in some way revisits the problem that originally existed. There's nothing wrong with reflecting and looking back and learning. And our emotions are a way of doing that. It's when we hold on to those feelings, fight back, that we can cause extended pain. And I'm not talking about just pain, like mental or emotional pain. Sometimes it can be physical pain. People can react in a physical way. Illnesses, immunity starts to get affected. We can have a physical reaction to holding on to these feelings. That's why stress is so important. And I find this a powerful tool in any situation. Maybe it's a business thing, that maybe something didn't work out with business and I'm going to feel frustrated or upset or whatever. I can allow that feeling to come in, to recognize it, acknowledge it, and allow it the space to then leave when it's ready to. But I'm not creating that resistance. And it leaves far quicker, leaving me happier and able to then focus on what I want to do, onto other things. And it's the same with people in our lives. It's not about giving up hope. Hope can remain, but recognizing that there's zero control or influence that can wield on this. It's completely out of our hands. When we have that acknowledged, and then we can allow the feelings to come in and then flow out, and we leave it in the past. And as long as we're removing expectations, I find my experience has been far more positive It allows me to be realistic to what I can achieve and what I can't achieve, but also acknowledge that sense of hope, even if it never happens. It feels okay to have that as part of my makeup. And if it ever arrives, then I'm grateful for it, but I have no expectations. And that feels like a nice blend, or it's a blend that works for me. And when I've shared this particular technique and idea, it's worked. It's allowed people to feel what they needed to feel, but not hang on to it. And it's created a healing process, both mentally and physically, that's really helped them reclaim a bit of who they are, which is, I think what we're after as we go through these situations. So I wanted to share that with you today for lots of different reasons, but I found it massively useful to allow myself to process difficult situations, difficult environments and problems, and to get me through them with respect to the feeling, but also allow me to move forward. So that's my kind of suggestion, idea for how you could manage certain feelings and certain emotions which you find challenging. I know I find it useful, I know others have as well, maybe you will too. So that's what I want to give you for today. I hope you're doing super well wherever you are. I'll catch you in the next episode.
This is how legends are made.